Hey everyone, this is Luke again, and welcome back to yet another Ninjago video onto the channel today. Now that Crystalized has come and gone, I can finally make this video. People were making these videos like year or two ago, but I decided to do it now, and that is, which sacrifice is better? Zane's sacrifice from Rebooted or Nya's sacrifice from Seabound? I remember people talking about this after Seabound ended, and a lot of people were actually preferring Nya's. And I think now, since Crystalized has ended and we saw what happened with Nya, I'm going to proudly say the tides are going to change back to what they should have been. So basically, Zane sacrificed himself to save his own life to save the Overlord, whereas Nya didn't not quite the same. It's Nya sacrificed basically her humanity, which is kind of the same, but kind of not really. Basically, she sacrificed her own humanity or her own human body to save Ninjago, but she just becomes one with the sea until Crystalized screws that up. But that's another conversation. So, what we're going to be dissecting here is what the moments leading up to the sacrifice versus the sacrifice itself and the ramifications of it. And we're going to determine which sacrifice is overall the better one. Now, let's look at the moments before. Now, with Zane's, there really wasn't any telltale signs that he was going to sacrifice himself. At least it didn't appear that way. And honestly, whenever I watch it, it's almost hard to believe that this guy sacrifices himself at the end of the season. Because you would not have thought that. Because there were no signs that he was going to sacrifice himself. Now, this has been a big criticism for Zane's sacrifice, as some people believe that there needs to be sort of like a foreshadow in order for it to happen. And this is where I have to disagree. Not everything needs a foreshadow, not everything needs to be built up. Depending on the circumstance, and if done just right, it could be done out of nowhere. And then we have the sacrifice of Zane, which, as I just said, was just out of left field, which was incredibly shocking because no one expected Zane. I mean, it fits within Zane's character, but nobody would have thought he would go to that lengths to save his friends and the world. And, he actually does die in the actual sacrifice. I know people called it Zane's death with quotations, but technically he did. He technically did die, even if it was for a brief while. And then he came back in season 4 with an all-new body, all-new look, and even a new voice filter over his voice, which I still don't understand why the voice filter is needed. We already know he's a robot, so why do you need to accentuate that fact with a voice filter? Doesn't make sense to me. But now that we've talked about Zane's sacrifice, and if you're wondering, Zane's titanium body stays throughout the course of the series. Although there have been, instances where the human part of Zane comes back. Most recently in Crystalized. Now, let's do with Nya's. With Nya, it's a little bit different, as there was a little bit of foreshadowing. Because if you remember in the episode 5,000 Fathoms Down, Maya says this one line that says, sometimes you basically have to make sacrifices that you just simply don't want to do. Which was comparing what she had to do in order to save both Nya and Kai from a young age during the whole Time Twins thing. It was not something that she wanted to do, but it was something that she had to do, basically. And there was also the line, that's just how the cookie crumbles. Now, let's go all the way to the actual sacrifice itself. The whole city is flooded. It's literally flood to the brim. And Nya figures out about the way Nyad, the ancestor of the elemental master of water, beat Wojira for the first time, and that was becoming one with the sea. But Benthamar is like, I don't know if you should do that because it's permanent. And she's like, I'll do whatever it takes. She doesn't care. As long as it saves the world, it doesn't really matter to her if she becomes one with the sea. And Nya has this very poignant moment with Jay, which honestly is pretty much a big tear jerker, especially if you're a Jaya fan, where she wishes that she overall spent more time with Jay, and then she goes out to the balcony of the building and looks at the water and her reflection staring in the water and as I love you, because that's always been a big criticism of the Jay and Nya relationship, is that Jay always says I love you, but Nya doesn't say it back, even though Nya just has her own way of expressing it, not through verbal language. Although, it doesn't hurt to say I love you verbally every once in a while. It doesn't hurt. So, she becomes one with the sea, does this beautiful little spinjitzu move, and becomes one with the sea. But the thing is, it basically wipes her memory in a way. It wipes all of her memory, so she's not the same Nya as we once knew. And we knew that as soon as, the last few minutes of The Turn of the Tide are playing, which is a masterpiece of an episode, by the way. And she essentially becomes one with the sea, and basically she just leaves. Like that. Like that. And, she's frolicking with the dolphins, being happy as always, basically leading a new life. And then the remaining ninja, mourn her loss, which was very well done, honestly. Now, let's look into the ramifications of that. This is where I'm going to get so mad. Basically, within the first third of the season, Nya is brought back because of the staff, the Forbidden Spinjitzu staff, which Asphira controlled, and basically she struggles to remember quite exactly what her purpose is. Now, before that, we saw an episode called The Call of Home, where Nya is essentially one with the sea, and honestly, that should have been her role, just being one with the sea, and then saving people from time to time. And then she has to talk with Niad. And then for some reason, I think it was because of the memorial lanterns that were kept sending in from the sea. And one of them was from her former boyfriend, Jay. And I think that's how she remembered him and remembered her family and whatnot, and she regains her memories back, but she wants to find out a way to reverse the whole process. And as I mentioned before, with the Forbidden Spinjitzu staff, that's what happens. And Nya essentially kind of reverts back to her season 1 self, where she was just Samurai X, which would be fine, but we ain't in 2011 anymore, so treating her as a damsel in distress after going through over a decade of character development was a real insult to her. And plus, they basically took away all of her fighting skills. Like, I understand she would be rusty. There's a difference between being rusty and just not knowing what to do. I would have expected her to be rusty, of course, but not completely inept. And the worst part about it is that a lot of the villains basically prove themselves right, that basically you're not a real ninja and that you were just a fake all along. And it just hurts. It hurts seeing that. And as I mentioned in my video about Nya becoming a ninja and how it might not have been the best decision, this probably further proves that, because if you're not going to continue with Nya being a ninja, then what was the point of making her one in the first place? So, they basically stripped of all of her power, all of everything. And yes, her powers do eventually come back. Sure, they're weakened, but they still come back. Kind of the same with the ninja in the last episode of Crystalized. So, let's judge this. So, overall, leading up to the sacrifice. I know some people would say Nya's is better because there were hints every now and then, but I'm gonna have to give this one to Zane, simply because, in my personal opinion, it was way more. The leading up to it, it made the actual sacrifice itself way more predictable. I mean, way more unpredictable, sorry. Whereas with Nya's, you can kind of tell something was going on. So I'm going to have to give it to Zane here. Then here we have the actual sacrifice itself, which is pretty. Which is. I'm going to have to, again, lean towards Zane again, because Zane actually gave up his life, whereas Nya just essentially gave up her humanity, which you could argue is in the same vein, but at the same time, she didn't technically die. She just became one with the sea, which isn't exactly on the same wavelength as giving up your life to save the world. And then we have the post ramifications. And as I mentioned before, Zane clearly wins here because at least Zane's titanium body is kept throughout the rest of the series, which showcases the consequences of that action. Whereas Nya's consequences are basically reversed almost immediately afterwards, and it almost like it pretends it didn't even happen, which is basically an insult to the actual sacrifice scene itself. Now, if I made this video around the time of Seabound's ending, some of those categories, they might have fallen with Nya's. They might have, like the actual sacrifice itself. That one, I was debating for a long time whether Zane's was better or Nya's was better back then. I was debating. And even then, the whole ramifications is the reason why this video was made really late after that, because I didn't want to jump to a conclusion that, oh, the ramifications are going to be kept permanent. And I was right, because we all know what happened, as I mentioned before. So I'm glad I actually saved it for much later. But overall, Zane's sacrifice is 100 times better than Nya's. And it's not because Zane is a guy and Nya's a girl. I don't want people to think that. It's because it was way more unpredictable. And the overall sacrifice itself had more stakes. Plus, he actually died, even for a brief period. Even though it was for a brief period. And the overall ramifications of the sacrifice are still there with Zane's titanium body. Whereas I can't say the same about Nya. There wasn't as much stakes put into hers. Her sacrifice itself was essentially giving up her humanity, but not necessarily her life, which lowered the stakes a bit. Plus, Crystalized basically immediately pretends that the sacrifice never happened by basically bringing her back, for one, and giving her powers back as well. So, the decision is Zane's overall is the winner. But what do you guys think? Which of the two sacrifices do you think is overall the better sacrifice? Zane's or Nya's? Let me know in the comments down below. But anyways, I hope you guys like this video. Give it a thumbs up. Subscribe to the channel by clicking on the red subscribe button and click on the notification bell to see every video that I will upload. And I'll see all you folks in the next video. Bye-bye!